And without further ado, this is Alex. Alex, are you ready to give us all you got?
I'm ready.
All right, then I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do what you do and share the F's that you're going to give to us tonight.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see. Thank you. Nicely done. Thank you. Oh, well, it's good to be here. Well, I guess for you, it's tonight. For me, it's this morning. My name is Alex Sloley. I'm an Agile coach, and I live and work in Sydney, Australia. So I'm in the future. Today is Friday morning for me, but it's nice to be here with everyone. I'm very passionate about the Agile community. I do a lot of speaking at conferences and events and meetups and stuff like that. And in fact, I'm so passionate about it. I wrote a book about it. There's my book. It was just released at Agile in Nashville in July, actually. And you can go to agilequiz.com/TAC, which stands for the Agile community. Buy it on Amazon. I'd appreciate that, get my sales ranking up. But you can also download the first chapter for free at that link. And then you can follow me on Twitter as well, and also email me. So if you have questions after this session, you can definitely ping me, and I actually respond. So today, we're going to talk about the fine art of 0 F's given. #AgileZFG. So you may be an Agile coach too. Or you may aspire to be an Agile coach, or maybe you're a leader or a scrum master or someone on an Agile team who coaches as part of their thing. I think everyone has a great coach inside of them. To be an awesome coach, you need to be able to give ZFG or 0 F's given. So today we're going to talk about what that means and how to do it. So here we go. I thought I'd give you a little history first. I actually went out and Googled ZFG, and this was the earliest reference I could find on Twitter for ZFG. It's a charming post. I've, hidden some of the text, so not to be offensive, but you can see that it's been around a while, since at least 2009 on Twitter, which is like, I guess, before, BC time on Twitter. But the skill has probably existed for as long as humankind has existed. The ability to give 0 F's. So why would someone, and specifically an Agile coach, why would they need to be able to give 0 F's? I thought I'd start off the presentation with the why, so we could get that right at the beginning. Why do you need this critical skill? And here's the answer. Power. Yes, that's right. It gives you power, like electrical lightning storm level power. When you can leverage ZFG to its ultimate capability, it gives you, the Agile coach, power. That's right. Maybe as human beings, we all crave power in a certain way. I don't know. But we're going to revisit this at the end of the presentation as well, when we talk about power. Well, let's get some fundamentals of ZFG covered, right? We'll talk about some of the philosophical aspects, maybe cover some practicalities too. I'd like you to go back to work, I guess tomorrow, because tomorrow is Friday for you, it's Saturday for me, but tomorrow to be able to go back to the office and practice ZFG. Right off the bat, I want to say ZFG does not mean I don't care. It just doesn't. ZFG is something else. We'll talk about what that means but it's not I don't care. And in fact, it has other benefits beyond just power, although power is the primary benefit from ZFG. When you as a coach or a leader or someone who practices coaching can embrace ZFG, it lowers your stress levels. So it's good for you. It unleashes creativity. When you give 0 Fs, it opens up a world of possibility. Rather than constraining you, it frees you. It's very divergent. And ironically, even though it's very divergent in that it opens up a world of possibility to you, it also makes things that you're observing in the real world more clear. So it accomplishes both those things. So yes, there are benefits to you, but there are also benefits to others. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, about the benefits to others. So primarily power, but then these are 3 benefits to you as an Agile coach. And remember, it doesn't mean I don't care. So my first question for you tonight, because I'm an Agile coach and Agile coaches ask questions and don't answer them, is how can you care and also give no Fs? Now, this is the interactive part of the conversation today. I want you to take a moment, consider your own personal answer to this question, and put it into chat. Yes, that's right, Zoom has chat. Go ahead and put your personal answer into chat if you feel comfortable doing so. Of course, there's no requirement, but I would love to see some answers in here if you're willing to share. How can you care and also give no Fs? Oh, I can see we've got some action going on in here. And I'm not going to really like highlight these or bring them up out loud. My goal is to help you process this and think about it. So when you go away tomorrow, you've kind of synthesized it a little. Ooh, I can see a lot of great responses in here. It's like I'm looking at a group of ZFG experts already, because these are all awesome answers. All right. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Well, let's talk about the first component that I assert is part of ZFG. It's the drama triangle. If you're not familiar with the drama triangle is essentially a theory of how people get into conflict. And there are 3 roles in the drama triangle, just like there's 3 roles in Scrum. Haha, what a coincidence. And in the drama triangle, there's someone named the persecutor, there's someone named the rescuer, and there's someone named the victim. Yes, that's right. It's basically a love triangle, I suppose. But what the drama triangle says is that in a conflicting drama in your team, in your organization, you've got someone who's angry and persecuting someone else who's the victim, and the victim is someone who feels helpless. And then you've got the rescuer. The rescuer is the hero that comes in and saves the day. Well, what the drama triangle illustrates is the fact that conflict in your organizations is all about power, which gets back to the power we were talking about earlier in the session. And someone brought up codependency. That's exactly right, because what the drama triangle says is that essentially the rescuer enables the victim. But if you get into the drama triangle a little bit more, what you figure out is that essentially what it illustrates is that it's people being selfish. They're playing these roles, right? And they're selfishly playing those roles without consideration of anybody else really in the system. Now, when people get into this drama triangle situation, no meaningful changes happen in terms of like resolution to the conflict. And in fact, it's a fascinating study in conflict, because what happens in a drama triangle is that in the threesome, the triad, or whatever you want to call it, people can change roles. The rescuer can start to feel like a victim, and the victim can become the persecutor. People can change roles depending on what happens in the conflict. So the question here for you today is, what role do you usually play? Take a moment, and if you're comfortable putting this into the chat, go ahead and share what role you think you play in conflicts. The three roles of the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. Well, this definitely takes some vulnerability to say this aloud, right? Doesn't it? I think probably Scrum Masters often fall into the rescuer category, right? I would think so. All three probably. There you go. All right. So what else is involved in ZFG? We've talked about conflict. Also involved in ZFG is awareness of self. So to be a ZFG master, I've just invented a new role, ZFG master, kind of like Scrum Master or Kanban Master, ZFG master. We've got a whole room of ZFG masters here today. What's involved in ZFG mastery? Awareness of self, for sure. So what is awareness of self? It actually comes from EQ, or emotional intelligence. Awareness of self means that you're monitoring your own emotions. It means on a constant basis, you're monitoring internally what emotions you're feeling. And just like the coaching stance, is something you get better at over time. Now, beyond monitoring your own emotions, it's recognizing your reactions. So when you're monitoring your emotions internally, which I guess is up in your head, right? Some people might say your heart, but you recognize your reactions. Like, do you get sweaty, or do you feel a burning sensation in your chest? Or do you, do your feet go up and down? You recognize your physiological reactions, which could be anything. They're unique to you, right? And then getting beyond that, identifying the emotions. So not only are you monitoring, linking the physical reactions to them, but then you're successfully identifying your emotions. So this is awareness of self. Critical when you're becoming a ZFG master, because how are you going to give no Fs unless you know what you're feeling and how to identify what you're feeling? We'll talk more about why that's important later on. But I have another question for you. Us coaches ask so many questions, don't we? Are you ready? Here's the next question. What emotion do you experience when you need ZFG? In other words, when you acknowledge that this is the situation I need ZFG in right now, what emotion do I typically feel when I experience that? Go ahead and put it into chat. Yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of EQ here, right? Well, pretty consistent emotions here. Now you may be wondering, well, why do I need to be aware of my emotional state, right? It's because to achieve ZFG, you need to be able to regulate yourself. Once you can figure out and monitor and understand your physiological reactions to emotions, you can start to regulate them. That means control of yourself, right? That means you're still feeling the emotions, but you're controlling yourself so you're not having an emotional physical reaction. And in fact, it helps with ethical reactions, because when you apply reasoning to how you react, ethical reasoning is the same thing. It's when you react in a way that's healthy and abides by a code of conduct. That's what ethical reasoning is, or an ethical response. When you can control yourself and how you react, those two can match up, which means that you're much more likely to have an ethical response when you're self-controlled. When you have an emotional, uncontrolled response to a situation based on emotion, you put yourself at the risk of having an unethical response. Just acting in the moment, right? Fight or flight. Now, the other thing that happens is that when you've controlled yourself and you're having an ethical reaction that matches up to your controlled reaction, you're actually opening yourself up to possibility or to change. So not only are you kind of already open to change to begin with, but it opens you up to more change or more possibility. So getting back to the original statement about it unleashes your creativity and divergence and the ability to be thinking outside the box. It creates space for you to go beyond just your emotional reaction into a logical reaction. So here's my question for you again. How do you practice control of self? Go ahead and share and chat if you feel comfortable. Yeah, deep breaths, meditation. Yeah. Energy leadership. Oh, I haven't heard that one before. Wow, we should keep track of some of these references. They're really good. Actually giving 0 Fs, yeah. Staying on mute. You know, my mom used to say count to 10, right? All right. Now let's get into ethics, because it's directly linked to ethical conduct, which is important for Agile coaches. So ethics. Well, ethics, there's lots of definitions of ethics, but I think some of the most useful definitions of ethics is that ethics is abiding by an ethical code of conduct. If you've ever gone to a conference and seen a code of conduct before, if you're a member of the Scrum Alliance or scrum.org, they have codes of conduct that you as an Agilist agree to abide by. Codes of conduct exist in other professions. For example, doctors and accountants and lawyers and stuff like that, right? They abide by a set of rules. Beyond that, beyond a code of conduct, ethical reasoning is the ability of a person to think logically in a way that not only abides by the rules, but by like a set of principles. Critical skill for coaching. The ICF, for example, has an ethical code of conduct. And I'm actually part of a group for the Agile Alliance, the Agile Coaching Ethics team. And we created the code of conduct for Agile coaching ethics. Now, I've provided a link in the slide here, but you can go to the Agile Alliance website, go read all about it. These are 3 statements from our Agile coaching ethical code of conduct. This was created by a group of Agile experts from all over the world. I will consciously avoid situations where I benefit myself to the detriment of the client and stakeholders so that I may maintain professional judgment and objective thinking. The key words here are professional judgment and objective thinking. We're going to link those back to ZFG. I'll make it transparent if my client is forming dependencies, back to the drama triangle. Someone mentioned dependencies, right? My services and will work towards their own self-sustaining agility. And then finally, I will create awareness when power, privilege, and rank are impeding my client's goals or my ability to serve them effectively. Now, these are just 3 examples from the Agile Coaching Ethics Code. I encourage you to go check it out. Definitely in my own personal development as a coach, I look at that code of conduct and I say, boy, that, you know, although these ethical dilemmas don't come up every day, it sure is useful when they do come up, and I can go refer to the code, and it kind of acts as a guidance for me personally as an Agile coach. What it does is it helps me to be a ZFG master. There's a lot of keywords in here that are linked to ZFG, like judgment, objective thinking, stuff like that. So my question for you today, lots of questions in this presentation, is how are you an ethical ZFG master? Go ahead and share chat. This one might be a little harder. It's a little more philosophical, isn't it? There's some good ones in here. That's okay to not know too. Okay, you're a potential ZFG master. I'm still working on it too. All right. So let's talk about ruinous empathy. Ruinous empathy is when you say something to somebody, whoever it is, and it might be in the form of feedback, that's nice and damaging. Not only is it nice and damaging, it's nice in addition to damaging. So you can see the play on words there, right? In other words, some people would call this sugarcoating or saying something nicely. Now, what actually ends up happening is it actually hurts the people or the person you're talking to. So why would you say something nicely when it could potentially be damaging or is damaging? When you're trapped in ruinous empathy, it's because you're avoiding an emotional response, but it's not because you're avoiding your own personal emotional response. It's you're avoiding their emotional response, right? Because you know, if you tell them the objective truth, they're not going to react well. So you're like, oh, I'm not going to deal with that, right? That's going to be messy. I'm going to say the truth. They're going to get upset, and I'm going to have to deal with that situation. Emotions are gross, right? And in fact, this is your way of trying to exert control over that person. You're trying to control their response to you.
Like avoiding conflict.
Yeah, it is, exactly. Yeah. So I'm interested, that was Maggie, right?
Yes.
I got a question for you. You ready? Here we go, Maggie.
Yes.
How can you be radically candid and not a jerk?
That's a good one.
It's not just for you, Maggie, but it's for everyone.
I think I like active listening. I think that is like the doorway to everything. Like really, really, really listen. Listen for keywords and see what are the emotional or the words that are holding a lot of weight for the person speaking or communicating.
It's tricky to do this well. I think most people who try to be radically candid end up just being a jerk, whether they want to or not.
Guilty.
Okay, so remember this. Giving ZFG does not mean being a jerk, but it definitely involves being radically candid. Because if you're not radically candid, you're going to hurt that person. Okay, so what's a way you can be radically candid without being a jerk? Now remember, we're talking about you're in a conflict or a potential conflict. We talked about the drama triangle. We talked about how you're going to be monitoring yourself and controlling yourself, emotional intelligence. We talked about how you need to be radically candid, but you can't be a jerk about it. So what's one way to do it so that you are a CFG master? Clean feedback is an example of a way to do it. And in fact, I saw some comments in the chat about how to give effective feedback. They're kind of scrolling through there, right? Lots of awesome stuff in chat here. So what's clean feedback? Clean feedback is when you understand your own bias as an Agile coach, right? I have this bias about something. This is before you even say something to somebody, usually feedback. I understand my own personal bias, and then I acknowledge bias, not only to myself internally, but I explicitly say it. And then I state my interpretation of that person's observable actions based on my own interpretation of my own bias. So let me give you an example. You might be giving feedback to a Scrum Master about the level of interaction they have with their team in a retrospective. Maybe you have a personal bias that they shouldn't really be guiding the team towards a predetermined destination about their continuous improvement item at the end of a sprint, right? So you want to give feedback to this Scrum Master about, right, how they're kind of leading the team a little bit more than perhaps they need, because you want them to be a self-managing team. When you give feedback to the Scrum Master, it'd be something like, look, you know, my own bias is that the Scrum Master doesn't really tell the team what continuous improvement items they should do. I mean, that's kind of like what was taught to me. That's how I kind of rolled in all my retrospectives. So I'm just going to state that right out the front. That's my own personal bias. And I observed you in the retrospective the other day, kind of leading the team, or at least that was my interpretation of what you were saying, right? Based on my bias. That's clean feedback. Now, I haven't gone over the entire structure of clean feedback, because clean feedback is a form of feedback where you use observation to give feedback to somebody. The important part is the acknowledging bias here, being explicit about your bias and stating your interpretation of the bias. So this is one technique where you can give radically candid feedback by acknowledging your own bias and making it explicit to the person or people that you're giving this radically candid ZFG feedback to. So my question for you is, when was the last time you created fear in someone else. I could certainly imagine situations where people give what they think is effective, radically candid feedback, and all they're really doing is making the other person scared. We got a hand raised. Go ahead, Sherry, you got your hand raised.
Jerry, you're muted. If you want to ask something, come off mute.
Oh, in the chat, okay. Do you see any? Oh, okay, I see. What was the specific example of acknowledging your own bias? My own bias, acknowledging my own bias was the fact that the way I was trained or taught or did retrospectives with my own teams was that I didn't lead them. Another way to acknowledge bias would be, another example would be something like maybe you're disagreeing with the team's refining rhythm. Well, on my team, we did 1 4-hour refining session every 2 weeks rather than a half-hour refining session every Tuesday and Thursday every week. Bias is essentially your personal opinion. What you do is you state your personal opinion. That's a better way to think of it, perhaps. Because clean feedback and feedback in general should be objective. By acknowledging your bias, you're kind of acknowledging the fact that it's maybe not 100% objective. And in fact, these techniques have been around for thousands of years. To be an effective ZFG master, you need to practice Zen. So what is Zen? Well, it's a type of Buddhism, but it can be broken down into essentially these 3 characteristics. Zen says that you perceive the true nature of things. Not only do you benefit yourself by perceiving true nature, but it benefits others. And in the process of perceiving true nature, you do it without arrogance or egotism. Now, this is ancient philosophy, been around a very long time. The key thing to think about here is, how could practicing Zen and perceiving true nature without arrogance or egotism benefit others? We have another question to Sherry. What words do you use to indicate that you're acknowledging something? Yeah, you can be very specific. You can say, this is my bias. That's generally what I say.
Yeah, sometimes I take sometimes I say my take on, or traditionally I've done, or with other teams I've done, or just anything that points to historical nature of my experience.
Yeah, those are all good. If you're familiar with clean language, you'll learn this in clean language, clean feedback. So the question here is, how does your ZFG benefit others, right? It's your ZFG. You're the one being ZFG. How could that possibly benefit others? Go ahead and put your response in chat. Some good responses here. right. So let's talk about external. I imagine we have a lot of Scrum Masters in here. You know about retrospectives, right? How you're like not supposed to have managers in retrospectives. We all know why, right? Why you're not supposed to have managers in retrospectives. If you've done this long enough, inevitably you'll encounter a manager who's like, what are you talking about? I go to my team's retros all the time and they're totally happy to say anything they want in front of me. And I'm like, yeah, right. Right. Retrospectives and managers. It's kind of the same thing with internal versus external coaches. If you're an internal permanent full-time coach in an organization, can you be a ZFG master in your organization? Do you have to be an external coach to be a ZFG master? Can internal coaches speak truth to power internally when their job depends on it? And vice versa. Can an external coach speak truth to power to a client when their job depends on it? I suppose both their jobs depend on it. But I wonder how that affects the practice of ZFG. Does it affect the power of ZFG when you're an internal employee versus not an internal employee? A lot of coaches out there would assert that you can't really have ZFG until you're an external coach. I don't know if I know the answer to this. And when coaches don't know the answer to something, you know what they do? They ask a question. So I have a question for you. Are you ready? How are you speaking truth to power, regardless if you're external or internal? I'm just watching your reactions in chat. I'm learning a lot of things from the people in this group today. We all have different experiences, don't we? All right. So, does ZFG contain neutrality? I think it's interesting to talk about neutrality as a concept. Neutrality is when you tolerate something. Sherry, we got another question. Go ahead. Did you put it into chat already? Oh, here we go. What does speak truth to power mean? Yeah, and actually, I put a reference in the slide. It's a fascinating study in terms of like philosophy. It actually originated with a Quaker. And speaking truth to power means that regardless of the power difference in a conversation between two people, that the person with less power speaks the truth to the person with power. I brought up another thing there too, which is power distance. Power distance is the concept of whether someone can feel like they can say the truth to someone based on power differential. Hopefully I answered your question, Sherry. So, neutrality. It's when you tolerate something because you're indifferent to what's happening. It does indicate a lack of involvement. You don't want to get involved in that thing. Doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to tolerate what's going on. That's neutrality. Now, the reason I bring that up is because neutrality can be involved in ZFG, but it isn't necessarily involved in CFG. Because when we talk about ZFG, although you can have neutrality, what you're actually seeking to achieve is something else. And we'll talk about that in 1 second, because I know you know what's coming. Us coaches just can't seem to stop asking questions. How are you expressing neutrality in your job, talking to people, stuff like that? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Compromising, yeah.
Oh, we have a hand raised.
I'll do it.
I heard a. Maybe not. Thought I heard it. Sorry.
All right. Letting waterfall occur. I'm not sure if that was meant to be humorous, but it's humorous. Okay. So once again, neutrality. You might end up having neutrality if you're practicing zero F's given. But what you're truly trying to achieve is this. Objectivity. Neutrality and objectivity are actually different. They're sometimes conflated, but they're actually different. So what is objectivity? It's a bunch of words. And these are the three that resonate with me the most, and I thought I'd share with you. It means you're uninfluenced. You're unbiased. And I think most interesting of all, uninhibited. So when you're having conflict or practicing ZFG, now getting back to conflict, why do you have to be a ZFG master? It's because you're in conflict or going to get into conflict. That's when you need ZFG. And you got to be objective, uninfluenced, unbiased, and most interestingly, uninhibited. I guess when I was growing up in, high school or something like that, we would have said like keeping it real or something like that. So you can see how it's different to neutrality. So my question for you is, how do you express your observations when you're stating your opinion, what you've observed? How do you do it objectively? Yeah. Lots of great stuff in chat there. Okay. We're nearing the conclusion of ZFG mastery. I should certify you all as ZFG masters. But I guess I should make it a 2-day course, right? Anyways. Oh, Sherry, you got a question, please. You're going to put it into chat, I know. Ah, you just did. Okay. Oh, okay, right. Is neutrality the same as being lukewarm or not? I think it could be. Neutrality just means not taking sides, is essentially what it is. And it's usually for the benefit of yourself or convenience, right? That's generally what neutrality is. It's like, ugh, there's a hot mess over there. I'm not getting involved in that because it's going to affect me. That's how it differs from objectivity, mostly. Yeah, someone said to be Swiss, right? Yeah. Neutrality means that you could, in theory, not get involved in ethically or unethical or immoral situations. Hey, something bad's going on over there, but I'm not getting involved in it. I'm out. Okay. So, to be a true ZFG master, really, we're coming up to this final conclusion. Fear is the mind killer. This is the thing that will prevent most of us from becoming true ZFG masters. So to be a ZFG master, you must not fear. It's the mind killer. It brings obliteration. You need to face your fear. Let it pass over and through you. And then turn your inner eye and watch its path as it goes through you. And where it's gone, nothing is left. Only you remain. Now, if you're a science fiction reader, you know this is from Dune. But it sounds pretty cool. Because it's true. Fear is the one big thing that will kill ZFG. So if there's one emotion you need to be monitoring and aware of your physiological reaction to and how you express it, it's probably fear. Now, if you're not practicing true ZFG mastery, not only will you create fear in others, but you yourself will feel fear. So my question for you is, when was the last time you felt fear at work? Always. Oh my goodness. Last week. Yesterday. Oh, holy cow. Every day. Oh my goodness. That was a very provocative question. I don't remember. That's good. That's good. A few months ago. All right. So I have a video for you and then a final message. I have turned on sound and stuff like that. Hopefully it goes okay. You never know with Zoom and video and all that tricky stuff. Okay, here we go. So this is best appreciated with your audio turned on.
We're inside a tree 15 feet above a lake high in the Rocky Mountains. We're in a nest of wood duck eggs, hatching after a 30-day incubation. And we're here to witness a rite of initiation that is at once daunting and amazing. Even though the mom duck laid her 11 eggs on different days, she didn't start sitting on them till they'd all appeared. That way, they'd all hatch on the same day. The hatchlings get to spend their first night in the nest. One night, that's it. Enjoy yourselves because tomorrow morning comes the big ordeal. Tomorrow morning arrives in a hurry. When the hatchlings first gaze at their mother, she's 15 feet below, calling for them to gulp, jump down to her. Can you imagine how much courage you'd need to take the plunge to Mama? Your first day on the planet, never flown before, now having to leap the human equivalent of 30 feet or more. Wow, made it! None the worse for wear. The truth is, 15 feet isn't that big a deal. Some hatchlings have to leap 60 feet. Why would these hatchlings take such a leap? Well, if they stay in the tree, they starve to death. Yeah, that sounds like motivation to me. Mom and her 11 little hatchlings. After a rite of passage like this one,
All right. So any presentation with baby ducklings in it, adorable, right? Adorable baby ducklings. I didn't put a question on here, but are the people you coaching the ducklings, or are you the duckling? I suppose that's the question I would put here. Okay. Here's the final question for you today. And I'm interested to see your responses when we go into chat. Here we go. When you achieve ZFG mastery, based on everything you've learned today, is it power over others, or is it power over yourself? Interesting responses. Now, those responses are for you to think about, take away, and ask yourselves, how can I be a ZFG master? All right. And then finally, I'd like to thank all of you for having me here today. If I was there in person, we'd have a big panda group hug, right? We'd have a big group hug. This presentation is available at the link, so you can feel free to go to it later. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Now, that my part is done, I guess. So I put it in our capable facilitator's hands now.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That was awesome. As an Agile coach, I definitely appreciate every single thing that you mentioned tonight. And I think I might be the water. I think people just run smack into me and then don't know what to do. So I think that's probably more like it for, I think I'm the water, but thank you. So we still have 30 minutes. If you have questions for Alex, I think you should ask him while we have him, because I know he's very busy. He's very booked all the time. I appreciate that he took some time to come to us. We can open up the floor to everyone for question and answers. I know you're doing a lot of chatting, but I'd like to just leave the floor open for at least, 5-10 minutes. If not, we can let Alex go, but you might as well take advantage of Alex being here while he's here. So I'll open the floor up for a couple minutes, and if there are no questions, we can move on, but I think you might have some. So please unmute, yell out, say, hey, Alex, say, hey, Amy, whatever you like. And
hey, Alex, I have a question. It's Maggie. I think where I stumble the most, or where I think people might have trouble as well, is that idea of neutrality, or like seeing how did you phrase it? Seeing the real truth, or trying to discover the truth. And I this comes up when I feel like I've reached that place, and someone I'm speaking with is very convinced that they have reached that space, and those spaces don't even overlap. Like, and we both are very, seemingly honestly and earnestly coming to the table saying, "This is the truth," right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a question in there?
Well, yeah, I mean, right? Right. What is the question?
Yeah.
Just a yes or no questions, Maggie. Yeah, no, yeah, so I think that I know that is when I've had difficulties, like sort of getting on the same page as other people, who are other influencers. And I'm a product manager, so I lead by influence. And
Yep.
it's just like I especially when let's take an example, when I'm newer to the organization and someone's been there 20 years or 10 years or what and they're like, no, Maggie, this is not the way it is here, and I'm trying to say, well, it's not far be it for me to say the way it should be, but this is the reality is, using your example, managers shouldn't really be in the retro or something like that, right? So it's so it's just the reality of well, I'm the product manager, so whatever, and their whole idea of what a product manager should do is different based on what other product managers stuff like that.
So I think the way I'm asking your question in my head is what happens when there's differing perceptions of what reality is. Is that a good summarization?
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to, any example will do.
Yeah. Definitely I've seen this expressed many different ways. Sometimes it takes the form of like, I think something's better than what you think it is, or I think something's worse than what you think it is, or I think it's something differently. I think you'll find in most of those cases, it's personal opinion rather than objective observation. So one of the things that you can model is observational or data-driven feedback. And the way
I could have said something like, or maybe I think I did try to say something like, well, I've noticed that historically product managers did X, X, Y, and Z, whatever. And but in my experience, product managers have done A, B, and C, and X and Y, but not Z. And stuff like that, and tried to have the conversation, and then but it's just like, well, you're in our organization, so you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and it's like, okay, well, you're not my boss, so.
And that's where the conflict comes in, right? That's why I started off with the conflict, because inevitably it will rise to conflict. Right. Someone in the very beginning of chat mentioned listening. It might have been you, Maggie. But that's one of the components of emotional intelligence, right? Is active listening. So acknowledging their opinion, is probably opinion rather than objective observation, and then having a conversation about it. And then some people just aren't aware that they're not acknowledging their own bias. So you're modeling that behavior by acknowledging bias, doing all that stuff. Then you start to get them thinking about the same thing.
Yeah, I think we left it as we sort of agree to disagree.
Yeah, that's unresolved.
You can't even get someone to acknowledge their bias. You certainly aren't gonna move biases, right? Yeah. So.
it's tricky, right? It
Thanks.
takes
Thanks.
time.
That's yeah. Thanks. That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
We do have a question in the chat. There was a chat question from Jan. She said, how do you identify ZFG organizations, especially on job interviews?
Right. Great question. I don't know. I mean, I've never thought about that before. Makes me think about there should be an additional slide in the slide deck. I think I've definitely thought about it from like a personal coach perspective. Like when talking to other coaches, I can kind of get the ZFG vibe from them or not. Generally, the ZFG vibe, I can tell when they focus of what they talk about becomes less them and more about like what's happening, like the reality of the situation. So they tend to use less words about me, myself, and I, and emotions and stuff like that. And they tend to talk about the situation or the conflict of the circumstances of the conflict. And you kind of get that vibe thing going on. So I think if you were in an interview with an organization and wanted to assess if they were ZFG or not, I think an effective way to do it would be to say something that could be confrontational if they weren't ZFG. So you might ask a question or make a statement that could elicit an emotional response and then see how they react, or ask like what would happen in a certain situation in their organization and see how they react to that. That might be one way to do it. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that question before, so thank you.
Great question. There's another one in the chat as well.
Yeah.
What is the fine line between ZFG and people thinking you don't care?
Yeah, that's why I get that out of the way at the very beginning. Also, neutrality can have that kind of vibe to it as well. So, lack of empathy, right? I don't care. Whatever the situation is, it is what it is comment. That's what that is. It is what it is means I don't care. So, definitely I wouldn't say that. It is what it is. I think when you explicitly state your bias and what you observe, regardless of the situation, it's probably a good thing and helps create that division between empathy and I don't care.
Yeah, and just doubling down on that, Alex. So do you think that just also saying, hey, this is, we're all here to do X, like, express that common goal. Like we're here to, put out a good product, or we're here to solve this, whatever. Or we're here to, have a good time and work hard and play hard or whatever. I think that also shows like, you have something at stake too. Like another question. How can I be ZFG when there's morals at play?
Yeah, and I didn't bring up morals. I was tempted to bring it up because as part of the ethical conversation, morals actually come into play. Morals and ethics don't always necessarily line up, right? So you might have your own personal morals that have been defined by perhaps your upbringing in a certain culture or religion or situation. Ethical reasoning and ethical codes are informed by morals, but tend to go beyond morals in that they're generally beyond just one individual person or small group of people and try to encompass many people, like an entire society. So in fact, there are ethical frameworks that go beyond morals. In like the virtuous ethical framework says that when making ethical decisions, you try to ascribe to virtuous states of being, like being honest, being open, being courageous, right? And in fact, when you look at like the Scrum values, for example, you know, when it talks about courage, that's more like an ethical state of being rather than a moral state of being. So you may have to, in your own personal situation, you might have to resolve the dilemma or conflict between morals and ethics. I know people who won't work at certain types of companies for moral reasons. However, is it unethical to work at those companies? Perhaps not, depending on the ethical code of conduct that's being applied in the situation.
I'm looking for the mind blown icon, but I don't see that.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to. You need to resolve that yourself as a person.
Another question, Alex, is it could it is what it is mean acceptance and not necessarily I don't care? Because wouldn't I don't care sound more like I don't care what it is? It's in the chat too if you want to read it.
I think acceptance could be I don't care, but not necessarily I don't care. But I definitely think it could be. And I think that's what most people mean when they say it is what it is. They're like, they might as well just say whatever. Whatever is another expression of that. Whatever. I can't change that. I'm just going to be over here minding my own business. I'm Switzerland, or whatever it is. What other questions do you have? Well, I remember one time many years ago, I had a conflict with a person on a team, a manager, and it got really tense until it finally concluded with the manager telling me that he was going to go tell Bill Gates about me, and that Bill Gates was going to come down to my desk tomorrow and fire me personally. This is a true story. I was at Microsoft at the time. And I was like, oh my God, Bill Gates is going to come down to my desk and fire me tomorrow. So I was pretty fearful for about 24 hours. Did Bill Gates come to my desk and fire me the next day? No, he did not. But this was an emotional situation. Drama triangle was happening, conflict. That person purposely used fear to get the result they wanted. So that's why you need to be a ZFG master, because of stuff like that. People will purposely do that because they're trying to achieve something they want, and they'll use fear as a weapon. Doesn't mean they're evil or good or whatever, but just means they're people. One of the things you have to acknowledge when you're an Agile coach is that people are messed up, including yourself, right? And so that's what they did. Now, as the years have gone on, I can recognize that response, I can regulate myself, and I can handle the situation much more maturely. And as you become, more of an enterprise coach, you deal with a lot of these situations at the executive level, because these are people that are used to getting their way and use these kind of power plays. So that's why it's a critical skill as an Agile coach. I guarantee you will interact with someone at a leadership level who's going to do this to you.
One of my favorite classics was just be lucky. We should just be lucky you have a job, or the passive way. we should just be lucky we have jobs. Like, like, you know, like don't, and oh man, that would piss me off when people would say that. I just feel like, actually, no, not if it's going to work like this. Yeah.
Oh, we have a question from Sherry here. What comeback response did you think of the Bill Gates situation? I can't remember.
I was just like, yeah, I would get my photographer
I don't
lined up, you
remember.
know,
I don't even remember.
my videographer.
It's
I
one
probably
of
said
those.
something.
It's one of those. If I'm important enough for Bill Gates to come down and fire me, then so
Yeah.
be it.
Exactly.
I don't know what I said. I probably said, "Oh yeah," or something like that. I don't know.
That's
Question,
awesome.
yeah.
Any other questions? What other questions?
Any more questions for Alex before we let him go? What time in the morning is it for you, Alex? I can see your clock back there. Yeah, 11 something.
11:13.
Okay, all right. So it's not too early, and it's not like 6
No.
a.m. for you.
No,
Okay, all right.
no, it's fine.
Okay, okay, all right, okay.
So-
Awesome.
So Alex, I'm going to ask a question to you. I'm going to go back to the Microsoft situation. And given what you know now of being your Zen master, how would you have how would you deal with that situation today to bring in all that you've been talking about tonight to avoid that level of conflict?
Yeah, generally, right now, I would have probably slowed down. I would have, rather than being reactive to the moment, I would have taken a moment, paused, take some deep breaths. Remember when I talked about my mom saying count to 10? I would have done something similar. And then I would have opened up a different conversation with the person I was talking to. So the conversation I was having with that person was, you have to do this. No, I'm not going to do that. That was basically the conversation. You're going to do this. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. And I would have pivoted to, okay, what's going on here? What's causing this to happen, right? I observe you're really freaking out about this thing, right? I'm kind of freaking out too. I would state my own state. What's causing this? I would have pivoted to something like that, which would have been a question, rather than us just saying things back and forth. So I think whoever said that you start asking questions was on the right track. I would have asked a question. But you notice I also stated my bias too. Now, that doesn't mean it would be any less tricky. It still would have been tense. You practice for these things and you learn about this stuff, but when you're actually in the situation, that's when things are different. And that's why you got to be ZFG, because when you're ZFG, it allows you to have and lead a productive conversation. Because they're not going to be ZFG. You can't make them ZFG all of a sudden. It's all on you, pretty much.
I think there was a follow-up question. Wait, how exactly did you state your bias there?
Oh, that I was saying that I was freaked out too.
Right, like this means a lot. And I think that's the thing where we get into a lot of things is people, it's not only you take things personally, it's like we take them so to heart. Like this is each objective is life or death. We get way too deep in, and that's when we get into trouble. Like you have to do this or it's the end of the world. And it's like, well, let's take a step back. And yeah.
So the reason it was my bias is because it's based on my personal interpretation.
Right.
Seems like we're winding down, Alex. I don't know. Is there anybody else that has a last question for Alex before we let him go?
Yeah, I have actually, this is John Vince. I have one comment actually that's always helped me over the years with any high tense situation is to step back a second, think and say, how is this gonna, how will this affect anybody 20 years from now? Or will anybody even remember this 10 years from now? And that always put things in much more perspective for me and the others around me if there was a high tense situation.
That's good. That's like objectivity through time and space, right?
Yeah. There's a question about are there any scholarships or discounts for the Scrum Master certification for those of us that don't have it yet?
For ZFG?
Yeah. Did you? Is that a real? There's a real thing. ZFG. We want our certification. Damn it.
No, but clean language. You can take clean language. Clean language mostly comes out of the UK right now, so that's pretty good. All the other stuff, I've just kind of in my presentation, I just kind of are my personal conclusions over the years. And the reason it's so relevant for me is that I work with a lot of executives, but it could happen at any level, really. So I think it's as you become more experienced over time and have more exposure to leadership, it's more likely to happen. At least that's been my observation. See, I'm stating my bias there.
So, Alex, I have one more question for you.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of reluctant to ask this question, and I've been thinking about it for several minutes of how to ask it and whether or not you can answer it.
Oh, yeah, let's see.
But as I sit here listening to this and how you're talking and how you're communicating as a woman in a predominantly male environment and dealing with predominantly male people in places of power, do you think there's a difference in how a woman can approach doing this? Because, we've heard the stereotypical thing of a woman being dominant and men thinking, oh, there she goes again. She's being a bitch. And I've had that happen to me because I am somebody who speaks their mind and tries to go in and, saying, this is my opinion, but I think this, where a man could get away with that. And they think, oh, you have a lot of strength. You got a lot of insight. A woman is seen as treading outside where she should be.
Yeah. I 100% agree with your observation that it could be more challenging for women. And I was talking to one of my co-presenters on another talk this week. Her name's Rosalind. And we were talking about my new presentation together. And she said when she was growing up, she was taught to not argue and stuff like that. And we were talking about the ZFG thing. And she said she found it particularly interesting because hopefully now things would be a little different, and that women, especially younger women entering the workforce, might be able to be like that more. I don't really talk about it in my presentation. Probably the closest I get to it is how do you give radical feedback without being a jerk? Now, in my slide, I mean that quite literally because I think people do that and kind of are jerks, but I think there's a corollary to it in that you might be giving great candid feedback and people perceive you as a jerk or perceive you in a way that's not the way you want it to be perceived. I don't know how to describe it.
You're describing it exactly as I've experienced it.
Yeah, so like you give the candid feedback and they're like, ugh, she's so pushy or whatever they say, right? So I think, I don't know if I have the answer to how to do it because I'm not a woman. My stab at it would be a woman might need to be even more ZFG master than a man, I guess is the way to say it. I don't envy you that because that's going to be tough as hell. Right?
Yep.
I think we have to listen. I think we have to listen for our opportunities a little more carefully than men might have to. I know I'm generalizing, but
Tough.
you might have to sometimes wait to be, you know, I mean, far be it from me, I say whatever I want, whatever I say it, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes there's something a little more, having a little more sensitivity to timing. And not that it's fair, but is sometimes the key.
Maybe
That's
so.
a really, really good point, because just to be very blatant, women traditionally get called aggressive far more often than men. And I've been the recipient of that when someone gave similar advice in an exact same manner and was told that they were amazing with that. And it's a flip.
Wow.
And you're just like, but I literally just said that.
Yeah.
And I think it's timing, but it's also tone. Women, I think, have to monitor their tone a bit more, in terms of how they deliver that feedback and when they deliver it. At least that's what I've noticed. I've noticed that I've had to associate a certain tone that's more like customer servicey when delivering that feedback than a usual speaking voice. Whether or not that's right, I've just noticed I've had to do that more often.
Right, and here's your cookie to go along with the.
Yeah, the bologna sandwich. That's what one of my MBA professors called it. When you give the feedback sandwich between two positive items, it's a sandwich.
Yeah, it's like the compliment sandwich. Here's the Oreo for you, and my tone is not aggressive.
And I am almost a boomer. I'm not a boomer. I missed by a couple of weeks. But I think we all find our own path. I have in my quiver, and I have to be very careful where I use it and, suss things out, is a ferocious sense of humor. Yeah, I think I'm channeling Oscar Wilde on occasion.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, we don't mean to say all men by any stretch.
Yeah.
Like that is a gross overgeneralization that I think is inaccurate. But I think it's understanding, knowing that there could be biases one does come against, and that could be anywhere, I think, quite honestly. And I think just acknowledging that does exist anywhere you go, for anything and for anything, I think would help anybody.
Sheena, I do agree with you on that count, that it's not all men. I've worked with some wonderful men who are wonderful to work with. Some of them are on this phone call. But there are those where, the ZFGs and the Zen, I think the women do have to take it to a different level and be more perceptive than men ever have to be, as to when that right time is that you have to say something. And it sucks that that's still the case these days, but that's
right.
That's
and it's not even men, because I've had women tell me I was aggressive too. So it's I think
there's that
embedded, and I think it's all learned behavior, and you never know when you're going to come across it. It's just, dealing with that learned behavior as you do, and just acknowledging that it could come up at any time for anyone.
This is a fascinating conversation. I'm writing notes for P2.
I think another area where it comes up too is when you're dealing with, in my case, I've been in customer support my whole life. And when you're dealing with software developers who think they know everything and you're trying to tell them there's a bug in the system and you understand where it's at and why it's failing, and they refuse to listen to you because they know more than you do. I mean,
that's a great point.
That never happens, John. Come on.
Every day of one's life, John.
Just kidding, obviously.
What is that called?
Arrogance.
Oh,
arrogance, yeah.
Ego.
Ego.
So Alex, how would you deal with that? So let's take that as a real life example of ZFG in trying to convince, as a customer service person, to the engineers that there's an issue.
Yeah, there's only one way to do it. So in the first instance, you give them the feedback that's observationally based, and they don't believe it. They don't think it's factual, right? So there's only one alternative, and that's to actually show them. So in other words, they don't believe you because they haven't observed it.
Yeah, send the logs.
I know we don't travel as much as we used to, and back in the old days. I'm dating myself here, but one way that I got some engineers to start listening was to take them on site and let them see the grief of the customer, like I was seeing it. And once they saw the grief, man, they were hot to trot and wanted to solve every problem in the world then.
Yep.
That's
because then they were in reality. They saw how frustrating it was for the user, the end user.
Oh,
Alex, have you also tried storying? I've had some success, not to say it's full grown success, when you tell a story to a developer and you say, what would you feel if you're just sitting there for 10 seconds waiting for the system to pass the cookie? And it's you're putting it back on them. So it's not like they have to be there, but you're telling them the story and putting them in that user's position and being like, how would you feel? Because you're giving them that sense without them needing to travel. I've had a little success with that, just because they're following you with the story, and then you come to the abrupt conclusion and they're like, wait, what?
That sounds like the elementary, that sounds like the mommy method. Like, how would you feel if someone hit you in the face with a water balloon?
That sounds like an actual conversation.
Oh yeah,
you didn't get the cookie from the server. How would you feel if you didn't get that cookie from the server?
No, but parenting and Agile coexist beautifully together.
There's this thing called business storytelling. Have you heard of that? Yeah, so I've read a book on it, and I've also done a workshop on it. And they actually teach you how to do business storytelling. I've never used it in the context you describe. It's general. I've always used it for like inspirational, like publicity, marketing, kind of selling stuff kind of perspective. I usually use it in like inspiring executives in like a visioning session kind of thing. But you could definitely do that. There's basically a formula to business storytelling. It's like use a person's name, describe the situation, how they overcame their dilemma. It's a real fascinating practice, but
it's sort of like persona development, sort of like as a product manager. Yeah, like
it
like
is.
I'm as this person, I'm trying to do this and in this whatever, etc.
Yeah. So what we do, I'm a designer also. I'm like triple threat. I'm the Agile coach plus a Scrum Master plus a designer, because my job is fun. We throw it into the persona, but we also throw in a journey map with a little bit of workflow diagramming to tell the story, because it also helps during our sprint reviews to continue that story going. Because our testers and our QA people have noticed that this helps them stay on track with user acceptance criteria. And it also gives that investment to our developers because they feel like they understand where those nuances to the workflows are, but it's all about taking them on the journey with you and making sure those like nuances are accounted for.
That's great. That's really insightful.
It's fun. It's fun, but then you also have to make sure that as you learn more that you're constantly updating it and that you're constantly sharing that story, because I always take during sprint reviews our users back to where we were in the story. So we're never just like, oh, here's the story again, starting it all over. It's like, hey, this is what we've learned. We're continuing on that story you heard 2 weeks ago.
A factual story.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there are techniques like to abstract emotion out of situations. So like, if you think of like A4 analysis or like Fishbone or any of that stuff, RCA, root cause analysis, those, or like the timeline retro, those are all ways to talk about stuff that's not supposed to involve emotion. So one of the old tricks you can do is when you're in a confrontational situation is to abstract away the conversation about emotion and to like put it on a whiteboard or on sticky notes and step away from it. You're like visually like stepping away from the emotion. That's another way to do it that I didn't kind of bring up as a technique. But I think that gets back to your storytelling thing. How could you tell a factual story? And of course, there's always the possibility that they're not going to listen to you anyway. I mean, you give the feedback, you have the conversation, you do the best you can.
Well, how many times have people used like, oh, I'm a systems engineer in a storyline like that, in a work, in a persona building or in a work piece of work, and people's understanding of what that a systems engineer is like from here to eternity, right? There's so many different definitions. So yeah, just having constant refinement is, you just can't have enough of that, I think.
Well,
on that note, I'm gonna thank you, Alex. I appreciate you so much. Yeah, we're over time. I don't want to keep it. It's 8:30 Eastern, so I'm sure some people want to get going and go to sleep. But I thank you so much for being here. It sounds like we have a need for you to return. So I hope that you will grace us again with your presence and add part 2 of ZFG and give us some more of your awesome stories. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You're welcome to hang with us. We have a couple of community announcements and things like that. If not, you are free to go and enjoy the rest of your day. And we have your contact information. We'll make sure that this is recorded, sent to our website, and everyone can access your information there. I know you are on LinkedIn, you've got Twitter, you've got a bunch of other places we can get a hold of you. So please hook up with Alex on all those places and pick his brain some more. Thank you so much, Alex. We really appreciate you coming out tonight. Group hug. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.